Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and dream catchers are a lot of fun to have in your home. They can be macrame or they can be made with thread, but they can also be made in a quilt. The dream catcher that I'm going to make today is called Dreamer, and it is a pre-cut, laser cut applique quilt. So all of these pieces are pre-cut for me, and they already have the fusible on the back. So it's just a matter of peeling off this paper and putting it on my background fabric. And they're laser cut, so they do have a beautiful clean edge. And the fusible on the back is a product called FlexiFuse, which is a really nice, lightweight, fusible bond. It doesn't gum up your needle. It is nice and soft when you're finished with it. And it's already on for me. The only thing I need to do is choose my background fabric. Because it is a dream catcher, I do want something that looks like a sky or water, something that I would look into and dream about. So I've chosen this beautiful Stonehenge fabric from Northcott. So it has a lot of blues and golds, so it could be the sky or it could be water. So I will need to start with a big piece, and you'll need about 1 1/3 yards of fabric. Other than that, you have all of your applique shapes. This is all you're going to need. Now those appliques are going to go on this dark fabric, so we're not going to be able to use a light box to transfer these patterns onto this fabric. So I'm going to share with you a couple of tricks and techniques that I like to use when doing this. So the first thing I need to do is have my fabric a little bit bigger than what you are going to want. And then when it's all done, I can trim it up. And I do make sure it is pressed. And I'm going to bring this right to the iron or some type of iron surface so that I do not have to bring this fabric and my appliques back and forth. With this kit, I did get a full-size page that I'm going to be able to take these marks and transfer them to that quilt. It also gives me the exact location of those pieces. Some of those pieces are already cut out for me, so I do not need to do anything. And then there are some that come on little sheets like this. Now this is the fabric already fused onto that FlexiFuse. So all of these little pieces are already done for me. They're all cut out except these tiny, tiny little notches. And that's just to hold them in place until you get them. The layout on the pattern page is exactly the way they're laid out, already fused and ready to go. They're also numbered on the pattern piece. So I like to take time and transfer those numbers to the back side. When you're looking at this, you're looking at the right side. So when you do turn it over, you have to keep in mind that you're transferring the numbers so that you're transferring the numbers that they match on the right side. You do not need to put the numbers on it. Sometimes I just find it a lot easier as I'm going along. And then I'm going to take a little pair of snips and just finish cutting out that little tiny snip. And it's really such a tiny little spot. You can see how clean the laser cut really made those edges. So I have this really large sheet of paper that's giving me the layout for the fabric. We already have a big center line marked in this pattern. So this center here will be the center of the entire project. But I want to center out individual pieces. So I'm going to center these. I could start with that center line and put a second line on. So I'll measure that piece that I want to center, which is 21 inches. So I'm going to need the 10.5 inch mark. I will use that center line that's already marked for me, plus the new line. Make sure that my ruler matches up. I now have the center of this big circle. Depending on the design that you're going to do, you can add more marks. So I'm going to take my fabric, I'm going to find that top half and I'm going to mark it on my fabric. I'm using dark fabric, so I'm going to be using a white chalk. Once I have this put on my fabric, I'm going to mark some placements for these feathers hanging down. So from the center line over, I'm going to transfer these lines right on top of that fabric. And because they're a little bit on an angle, I'm going to take a measurement from the center line over to the top, from the center line to this bottom. So I'm going to transfer those 4 lines right on top of that fabric. I'm going to continue marking. I will not be marking the beads, but the feather I do want to mark. So I'm going to take that and do a line over on all of my leaves. And I will just put a straight line just to give me a guide. And that very last one, where the word dreamer is, I will find a line on that pattern, mark that line, and then I will be able to use that measurement. So let me show you what the fabric now looks like. So here are the markings. I have that center for that big circle. I have my marks for the long threads that will hang on those feathers. Then I have some side marks for the feathers. Then the final mark along the bottom, which will have the words dreamer. I am using a white chalk, and this is a disappearing white chalk. So if I make a mark and iron it, that mark does disappear. And I use this chalk. It's from Urban Elements. I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. But with all marking pencils, please try it on a scrap fabric first before you put it on your quilt. So I have these markings. Now I'm going to be able to start putting the applique shapes. So the first applique that I'm going to put on is that center of the dream catcher. I do have the marks, which will really help me line that up. But there is one other way that can help me line this up. The first thing I need to do is take off this paper backing. I'll put a little slice in the back of the paper with just a straight pin. And I do find a thick part to start with. Just run that pin just along the paper. So you're putting a little cut in the paper, but you're not cutting the fabric. That's just going to give me a little handle so that I can peel off the paper. And definitely take your time and gently remove that paper. We do need to be very careful when we peel off this paper. And there is a bit of a trick on doing a big picture like this. I'm going to replicate what I did. I'm sorry, I thought the camera was running, but it was off. So I'll explain what I did. So I started and peeled off a little bit of that paper. So the fabric is against the bottom. And then place a long ruler over top, just in that area. And then you're going to be able to peel back a little bit more. Move that ruler and peel back a little bit more. So you're going to always put that ruler down, move it, and then roll that paper off. You're going to be able to put your hand underneath to loosen up. And just by moving that ruler, this is going to hold that fabric down so we're not stretching it. It really makes it easy for that paper to come off. So everything has stayed flat as I took the paper off. So the glue is now face up, so I will turn that over so the glue is facing the fabric. Because I have the markings all the way along, I can just center this on. But there is another way we can help center that onto the fabric. Take that big placement page and fold it in half. I have folded it right along that long vertical line. So I'm going to line it up now, right along those marked lines. So I'm looking at half, which means I can now take this applique and line it up with the paper. So I have half the applique on the paper and the rest on the fabric, which now means this is lined up exactly. put a ruler over top of that applique on the fabric. It's going to hold it in place. Now I can just remove that paper. And depending on the pattern that you have, you can then place this right back on top, line it up, and add more pieces. So I can do that to the feathers. So instead of folding it horizontal, I can fold it vertically, so I can match up some lines underneath this paper. I'll be able to just place them in, hold that down, and remove the paper. So you're going to be able to use this folding paper for various areas in different applique shapes. So to applique this down, we're going to use a cotton setting with no steam on our iron. And we can press it anywhere between 5 to 8 seconds. There are flowers that are going to go in the one corner, and I get to build up different things on top of this. So I do not want to give it its full pressing right at the beginning. I'm only going to press it for just a couple of seconds. That's just going to hold it down until I get to the next stage. As with any fusible web, if you overheat, you disintegrate the glue. So I just want to put it down and just temporarily put that down. Now I can add on the extra little pieces, and then I'll give those a second or two. And by doing a little at a time, it means this is not going to get too much heat. I have a little trick if there's an area where you need to overlap. So this lighter feather is going to go on top. So I'm going to peel back a portion of this paper. I still have the paper on the big portion, but I'm going to slide those two together. So I'm going to line up that bottom one, and I can see that outside edge. So I'm just going to keep peeling, leaving as much paper on the back as I can until I get that placement. So the fusible is going to go on this top fabric, but I have the two papers along that back. So nothing's going to get glued on that paper. Now with a quick little press, those layers are together. I can do the same and put that bead on top now. I'll peel just a little bit of that paper back and slide those two together. So I still have the paper on. I can line up all of those pictures, then just give a little press. I can do this for anything that I need to build up with. I now have that one complete shape, and I can peel off the paper. So now I've made one complete applique shape ready to go. By making these little sandwiches and sticking them together, keeping on as much as we can, it's just an easy way of lining up those pieces. The word dreamer has really worked well overlapping these areas. So I pinned the pieces down, I overlapped, and I just pressed in those areas to hold it together. Now I can remove those pins. Nothing is stuck on the paper, but that word dream is all together in one applique. And you can see where I've overlapped those pieces. So I've used that same method where I've folded my paper in half and I've used half as a guide. And I did put some pins to secure this. Once everything's lined up, I'm going to put that ruler there to support it. Now I can gently remove that paper. And it's exactly in the place that I want it. Lift the ruler and just make sure everything is flat. And then once again, just give a light press. I did lightly press on the feathers, but I left those top circles not pressed on because I'm going to make a decision at this point. And the decision will be, what will I do to hang the feathers off of the keeper? We can use little pieces of rope, rickrack. We can do a very tight satin stitch, but I've decided I'm going to use this very thin bias binding. It's 1/4 inch bias binding. I'm not going to open it up. I'm going to leave it the way it is. So I'll need to cut the 4 lengths that I need. Now this does not have a fusible on it, so I will need to glue it down. And a few drops of children's school glue will work fine because I will be stitching this down. I'll be able to add just a little bit of heat to dry that glue. Now I will add on that last bead, and it's going to cover the end. So I'm going to do this to the remaining 3. I did create all of the flowers into one large applique shape just by overlapping them and fusing them all together as in one big piece. The flowers can really go anywhere that you would like those flowers to go. They could go on the dream catcher. They could go in the bottom of the quilt. They really can go anywhere. But wherever you decide that you are going to put these, you now will give this a good press. I'm going to take these really pretty flowers and I'm going to make a beautiful label for the back of the quilt. So everything so far has been pressed with just a very, very light, quick pressing. I now can give it its good pressing. Because we already pressed this for about 2 or 3 seconds, I would only press it for 5 more seconds. And just place that down and count to 5 and move. It's very important that you do not move your project while it is warm. The glue needs to cool before it is fully activated. After this is cooled down, I will turn it over and press it from the back side. For the front, we were only able to lift up that iron and press, but for the back, I can iron it. So I'm going to just be able to give a little bit of a rub all the way along the back. Once again, I do not need to have that iron go for a long time. I do not want to melt the glue. I just want to make sure that I get all of the areas. And when I'm finished, let it cool down. It is now ready for me to go and secure these down. I can use a satin stitch or a blanket stitch or any stitch that you would like. So to stitch this down, I'm going to save that for another day. And if you look really close, all of those white chalk marks have completely come off. Having this kit already laser cut for us and fused for us means we are able just to go to the iron and get that all secured down. Now I can have the fun of doing all of the applique stitching to stitch those down. And I didn't have to do any macrame at all to get my dream catcher. I'll put a link in the description to the pattern and the kit, and I also will put a link into this disappearing chalk if you're interested. I do hope you found some of those tips and tricks on appliquing on dark fabric useful. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.